Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Brett from Hamilton, Ontario. Lena says it's been a while. It has. It feels like it's been like a year since I streamed. Last week we were off. We had a mental health day off. I love working for Adobe. We get random days off to just focus on us and our family. It's wonderful. Anita from Toronto, my hometown. Great to see you. Mohammed and Samuel. Aubrey from Boston. Samuel says, is this an actual shot or a green screen? So right now it's a green screen, only so that I can switch over to my desktop and there won't be a background around me. But that is a picture of my office. So a little bit of a clever workaround. Manib and Drew from Illinois and Solomon. Happy to see you again. I'm happy to see you too. And we've got a new Anbu and Philip and Michelle and Wade and Hala, Paolo. Great to see everyone. Megan from Dublin, Solomon from Egypt, people from all over the world, Bangladesh. And I know for some of you it's like 2 in the morning or midnight or something like that. Go to sleep. I would be way passed out at this time, or at that time I should say. You're all in the future. Go to sleep. This will be available in the morning as well. All right, Laura from Belgium, and Tahir from Istanbul, Val from Uruguay, Tarek from Palestine. Oh boy, all over the place. This is great. All right, enough wasting time. I can just go through this forever. Let's go ahead and hop over to my screen, and this is Masterclass number 63. We've been at this for 63 weeks. That means there is 63 hours of completely free, in-depth Adobe XD content on these masterclasses, which is wonderful. It's great. All right. Farhad saying, I am the best man. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So what are we going to be creating today? Well, if you follow me on Twitter, you did get a sneak peek a little bit earlier on. I did post this, and this is a preview of what we're going to be creating. We're going to be focusing today on building out a photo gallery or a camera application, whatever you want. And you can use this for a variety of things. We all have, camera applications on some of the devices that we're on, whether it's our computer or our phone. There's the Photos app on iOS, Lightroom Mobile on various devices. So we're going to be kind of going down that route. And, I, of course, slipped in some skeuomorphic elements that we're going to be exploring as well. Maybe we'll animate them. Who knows? We'll see. All right, so without further ado, and if anyone has questions throughout this stream, definitely throw them in the chat. I am taking a peek from time to time. We've got someone from India and Colorado and Pakistan, Nigeria. Awesome. All right, so here we are in Adobe XD, and I think for this one, we're going to start with mobile. I believe the last few masterclasses I focused on desktop and web experiences. Renee says, you freaking rock. Thank you, Renee. You freaking rock too. All right, so we're going to go with, let's just go big. We're going to go iPhone 12, 12 Pro Max, iPhone 13, or whatever it's going to be called, should be coming out soon. I'm excited about all the different phones and stuff like that. I'm very tempted to get that new Galaxy, the flip one. The first one was kind of weird, but I had a Razr back in the day. Not like the one you shave on your face. I clearly don't have that. But the Motorola Razr. So there's, the flip phones kind of have a nice place in my heart. Alrighty, is there a time trigger between states of same components? So, Solomon, there is not at the moment. But one of the product managers did confirm earlier this year that it's actively in the works. I will say, however, that it's a complicated project. Sometimes I talk to the engineers about these things. I don't understand half of it. So it'll be ready when it's ready, but it is actively in the works. So, who knows when it's coming out? I don't. I wish I did. All right. So we're going to start off with the gallery, and I'm going to just go ahead and name that artboard at the top. And this is going to be where all of your photos live. And I'm thinking, we might want to get a little bit creative with this. If you open up your Photos app on your phone, it's usually a grid, like 4 by whatever going down, right? Might want to mix that up just a touch. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to start laying out some of these photos, and then we'll get to things like the navigation bar and, other elements that help you go back and forth. So I'm going to start by grabbing the rectangle tool, shortcut key R, and I'm going to just drag one out at the top. Now this up here is going to be the first image that we're going to be placing in here. And we're going to have, a few various featured images that are scattered throughout this gallery. Sam says, your mock-up is so clean. Thank you, I appreciate that. And Sam's been working on, go check Sam out on Twitter. He's been working on some cool stuff. There was a concept for an Apple Watch and I think an iPhone 13 as well. All right, so we've got our first container in place. I'm also gonna go ahead and select the artboard. I'm gonna double click on the background and I'm gonna just change the artboard color to a nice dark color. You can go pure black if you want, definitely helps with OLED displays, or you can bump it up just a little bit so it's a little bit smoother on the eyes. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's going to be a little bit of space in between the photos that we're going to be eventually adding. All right, so we have our nice featured image at the top, and in just a moment we're going to go ahead and actually place some images in here. But for the next ones, maybe for this right over here, we might want a row of images to kind of break things up. So there are a few ways to do this, right? You can go ahead and hold down your shift key and draw out a rectangle, which will constrain it to a perfect square. And then you can duplicate and kind of, finesse things into place until 3 of them or 4 of them or whatever it might be fit perfectly, right? You can of course also use a repeat grid, but if you want to make sure that you are able to fit all 3 of your grids or squares or cells or whatever you might want to call photos perfectly, what you could do is draw out your first rectangle or square and then actually grab it and then drag it all the way across, because we do want these photos to fill up from the left to the right. So what I'm going to do is we have this rectangle extending from the left to the right side of our artboard, and then inside of the properties inspector you can actually do mathematical equations. Crazy, right? I'm terrible at math, so if you ask me what 428 divided by 3 is, it would take me 14 years to figure that out. But /3, boop. It's that easy, right? So now we have a rectangle that will fit 3 perfectly across. So if I duplicate these, look at that, perfect, right? Now, of course, we want a little bit of spacing in between each one. So you can start experimenting, -4, for example. And if you wanted to, you can also get rid of the decimal places. But if you do that, you're gonna have a little bit of extra space on either side, right? Not bad. I do want a little bit less space, so maybe we'll just do -4. Is that what I did originally? I don't remember. Did I do 8 or 4? I don't know. That looks okay. 6 isn't too bad. I think it's a little bit too much though. So let's try -2. And we can do something, that's a bit better. I know 3 is not the greatest number in the world for the spacing in between, but it could work. So at this point, now that you have one of your rectangles in place and you know that 3 of them will fit perfectly across this artboard, there are a few ways you can get additional cells going across, right? You can use a repeat grid, and of course at the top, there's a lovely repeat grid button, and boop, you press that. Where's my boop button? Aha, there it is. All right, so when you activate a repeat grid, you have these 2 handles, one on the right and one at the bottom, and you can just drag out 2 additional more. And then you can hover your mouse in between and then pull this back just like that so that they fit really nicely. And the nice thing about this, hey, Megan from, I believe, somewhere in the Edmonton area, great to see you. So the benefit of this is that if you have additional elements inside of these cells, like text or icons or whatever it might be, all of that will remain up to date if you make changes across all these cells, right? Now, of course, there are some downsides. You can't rearrange them, so on and so forth. So you have to really think about what direction do you want to go. Another option is to use a stack. So if I have this cell selected, this rectangle, I can pop it into a group, Command and Control G. I'm going to call this row, and then I can enable a stack within the properties inspector right down here. turn that on, it's going to automatically default to a horizontal stack. Now I will note that if you had multiple objects inside of this group going across or down, it would recognize that. So it would define it as either horizontal or vertical based on those layers. And once you have that, you can now dive into this group and duplicate with Command and Control D, and then again. And just like a repeat grid, you can hover in between, hold down Shift, and drag on back like that. Now, of course, one of the great benefits of using a stack is you can very easily just rearrange objects by moving them, which is wonderful. And of course, if you use components, you can get similar functionality to a repeat grid where everything stays up to date. Go Oilers, fine. They're Canadian, so, you know, they kind of pass, but yeah. Shally is saying how to make pivot points like moving needles of a watch. So in XD right now at the moment, everything rotates around the center. There isn't a way to move the pivot points to the top right or top left. There are ways to fake it by creating, you know, invisible ellipses that kind of extend past the shape. Maybe I'll get into that in another masterclass, but yeah, there's no way to move the pivot points. Maybe one day in the future. But yeah, that's that for now. All right, so we have another row of photos, which looks really nice, right? And I may want some photos going down the artboard as well. Now this is kind of cool. So we have this row going horizontally across, and now we might want a row going vertically down the artboard because we want some space right in this area here for a larger featured image. So watch this. So I have this row selected. I'm going to duplicate it. I can either Command and Control D and move it, or I can hold down my Alt or Option key and drag it down. I'll make sure that it's the same amount of pixels in between these rows. And you'll notice if I zoom in here, as I'm moving it, it snaps and, oh, I forgot to, you have to, there we go. Right, see it snaps right there, and it highlights in pink to let you know that it's exactly the same spacing as the row at the top. Again, 3 pixels, not probably ideal, but we're gonna run with it. But what I wanted to get at here is we don't want a horizontal row this time, we want a vertical row, right? So all you have to do is inside of the Properties Inspector, boop, and it rearranges all the objects inside for you. And of course, if you wanted more, you can double click in and duplicate, and you now have one more, right? Super cool. All right, so now for this area, I mentioned that I do want a larger featured image. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our rectangle, and we are going to draw one out like this. We're gonna make sure it hits the right-hand side. Make sure all this stuff aligns, and of course you can use guides, you can use all sorts of different things to make sure things align really nicely. And if you want precise rearranging or transformation, you hold down your Command key on the Mac, Control key on Windows, and you can use your arrow keys to resize by individual pixels. That looks it almost lines up. Now, we are gonna run into a little bit of a problem because these particular rows or shapes, they're, because we use some math, they have some decimals. So things won't line up perfectly, but honestly, you probably can't see it. All right, can you spy on XD developers and tell us why we're getting Arabic, or I guess when we're getting Arabic and right-to-left language support? So I don't need to spy on any developers for that. The short answer is we absolutely want to enable right-to-left support and Arabic languages and stuff like that in Adobe XD. The challenge, let me actually, there we go. So the challenge with that is the text engine that's currently living in Adobe XD, right? Hello. So this text engine over here, it's been there since the beginning of Adobe XD, and it's just not capable of handling that many text features, which is why, you know, XD is lacking in some areas for text features, right? I know many of you have pointed that out. We're obviously aware of it. So the solution is not to just throw a bunch more at this current text engine and hope that oh, you couldn't even see because I was on me. Huh. So the solution is not to throw additional features at the current text engine, which is actively in development. It's going to be a very large project because, you know, it's a large feature. So when that new text engine is ready to go, I believe it will support right-to-left support. If it doesn't immediately, it certainly has the ability to. So it wouldn't be very difficult to add that in afterwards. So that's the short answer of it. There's probably a much longer answer that I can't go into at the moment, but yeah, it's on the roadmap, it's in the backlog, but it does require a new text engine. All right, George says, what are we building today? Very quickly, we are building this camera/photo experience. All right, you can use Illustrator and export text as SVG. You could definitely do that. It's not optimal, but you can do that. All right, so we have our nice featured image up here at the top, and we may want a few additional images, scattered over here. So this is another opportunity to use a row, and I can just delete some of these items, move that over, and maybe I'll just move another one here. And then maybe down here, we'll just have one more featured image, and then the row over here, right? Perfect. All right. Now, in a moment, we're going to look at how we can enable scrolling and things like that. Is there an ideal distance between grids? So it really depends on your developer, right? Some people love using the 8-pixel grid, so you can do 4, 8, 16, that sort of thing. Some people like 10. It really comes down to a conversation between you and a developer. So, and of course, the device itself. It's hard to answer, but 4, 8, 16 usually works pretty well. All right, so we have all of these boxes available, and now we can start adding in some images. Now, going back to our talk about stacks versus repeat grids, of course, one of the benefits of using a repeat grid is you can grab a bunch of images and then just drag them all into the grid, and it's going to populate. Now, we're using stacks, which doesn't have that ability. So what we can do is just grab an image. Let's say there's so many good images here. We've got some people images. We have some travel images. Ooh, look at this image. Like, that is a great image. Grab this from Adobe stock, by the way. So let's try grabbing that, popping that right in here at the top. And then for these other ones, let's just, scatter some. Put one there, and let's go for some people images. That one looks pretty good. Let's go for another featured image. I think this one, that's a great looking image. We'll put that right over there. There we go. Oh, you know what we need? We need some pets. Can we change the border radius? You can. So I'm not sure if you're suggesting that I change it in this example, or in general, but you can change the border radius by hopping into a rectangle or a polygon, and over to the right, you can either change it in the properties inspector, or you can grab one of the handles and drag that on in, right? There we go. Can we bring one artboard to another artboard? Hold on, I lost the comment. Like sliding images from left to right, in and one. I'm not sure I understand that question. I'll take a look at that afterwards. All right, so let's keep adding in some images. Pop that one there. And let's get some pets. We definitely need some pets, and I have some just adorable pet images. Look at that. Look at this cat. And then look at this. I don't even know what this thing is, but it's wonderful. So that's gonna go right there. And then we've got this little pug, or whatever this thing is called. Squircle. Megan says Squircle. It's almost like a Squircle. If you want a Squircle, the Super Ellipse plugin is your friend. All right, let's go over here. I have some other images. These are some premium images from Adobe stock, which are just wonderful. All right, and this one is great. You can also double click on a shape and either adjust the scaling or adjust the position, just like that. And let's go for, that's a good looking image there. And we'll go back to our places. Maybe we'll drag this one in here and this one right there. All right. Oh, I think we had one more spot down at the bottom. Maybe a picture of a lemon. I don't know why, but yeah, there you go. Frenchie's just got offended. Oh, did I mislabel a dog? This one here? Oh, is that a French bulldog? There you go, that's why. I apologize. Am I a dog or cat person? I am a dog person. I like cats, but I'm deathly allergic to them. So we do have a dog. We have a Yorkshire Terrier, and he's just the cutest thing. All right, so this is looking pretty good. Just with adding a few images and having these larger images as well, just brings really new life to this experience. Now, we have to start thinking about where we're going to place additional elements. You know, if you go to any of these applications that are like this, you don't just have this gallery, right? You might have some additional information at the top, like maybe the date or the month, or, you know, a title, for example. You might have a back button. You might have some sort of a filter option to go, you know, sort them like this, like a gallery view or on top of each other, right? Oh, someone asks, are smart guides help both vertical and horizontal distances at the same time? I believe they are. They do. So if you move things around, I'm inside of a group right now, but in some cases you can see, like here, right? So you can kind of see the smart guides are letting me know that things are lined up horizontally and vertically. So it depends on the situation, depends on if you're inside a group or not, but yes, they work in both directions. So again, at the top, we want to add some information. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, at the top of especially an iPhone, now we're slowly, thankfully, moving away from this, but you do have the lovely notch, and it's, you know, somewhere around 40 pixels from that top. And you want to make sure that nothing goes in that area. So just so we can see it, we'll make it nice and pink like that, right? So don't put anything up there. No one's going to be able to see it. They're not going to be able to interact with it. So anything below this will be visible and interactable. Interactable? Is that a word? I don't know. It is now. So we're going to go ahead and let's say, what month is this? We're in August. How are we already in August? This year has gone by so quickly. It's crazy. All right, so we have our title up here, and we're going to change this to white. And you're probably already noticing a problem. Let's change this to Avenir Next. It's a pretty nice typeface. And we'll bold it a little bit. We'll make sure it's centered. And we probably don't need 20 because that's a little bit too large. Let's try maybe 16. All right, so the size is pretty good. I'm happy with the typeface. We have a problem, right? The white text, which is typically what you would see at the top of an application like this, the white text is blending in with the clouds in the background. That's a problem, right? And you're going to notice if I go ahead and draw out, let's say, an arrow, I'm going to activate my square grid Command and Control apostrophe, grab the pen and boop, boop, right? Change this to white as well. Maybe I'll round out the corners and the caps just like that. And then I'll make this a little bit smaller, and maybe I'll thicken it up a little bit as well. And again, what you're noticing, it's kind of up there, but it's very difficult to see, right? And Shafiq is saying it's really hard to choose the right font style for me. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a handful of fonts like Avenir Next, Helvetica, I suppose, San Francisco, Apple's font. There's a few, Roboto and Open Sans. There are a few that, you know, always work for most things. And then, you know, then there are some stylistic ones that I sometimes use as well. But anyways, you're noticing it's still very difficult to see. So what you can do in a situation like this, I'm going to delete that for now, is you can use some sort of an overlay. So you can grab your rectangle tool, again, shortcut key R. You're going to drag one out, let's say to about this area. There's no perfect size for this particular overlay. And I'm going to hop into my color picker, and we're going to switch this over from a solid color to a linear gradient. Now, what we're going to do is both colors, top and bottom, are going to be set Drew Papyrus. At least it's not Comic Sans, I suppose. So we're going to set both these colors to black, 1 and 2. And we want this to fade. So the bottom color, which is currently selected, we're just going to grab that opacity slider and drag it on down. And we want to make sure that this overlay is below these two elements that we just added. So the month and this arrow. I'm also going to group all these elements just to keep things organized. And this will be top section. And I'm also going to group all these photos. And it's going to be important in just a second. Comic Papyrus. Oh my gosh. Cleansing my ear from Jason's creepy song. It was certainly creepy, and I'm going to have nightmares, but it's amazing how Jason was able to do that in like less than an hour. So we have our top section, and just by adding that overlay on, we can now see that text and the arrow over to the right, the left, I should say. Now, of course, you can move this up and down if you want to make sure that everything is visible. But at the same time, we want to make sure that this image here is also visible. So you have to really, spend some time tweaking it. And you can also drop the opacity of the overall layer just a little bit, not too much, because then you're left with the same problem, right? So around 80% could work. All right, perfect. I tried to summon Alex with Comic Papyrus earlier today. Oh boy. I think if you say it 3 times, all graphic designers just explode or something. All right, so we have this, and to balance this off, because we have this text in the middle, we have this arrow to the left, it's kind of looking weird, right? There's nothing over to the right. So what we're gonna do, maybe we'll have an icon over here that will allow us to switch the filtering. So instead of this gallery, we can just do a top to bottom view, right? So for that, we can make our own icon. Of course, you can go ahead and grab an icon from a library, but let's grab the rectangle, draw out something like this. And then maybe we can duplicate it upwards, but this one might be a little bit thinner, and then something like that, right? Just so we have almost like this top to bottom, very similar to what you'd see on Instagram and various other applications. Now this one is about 28 pixels from the left, not the greatest number either. Let's get rid of those decimals. Let's go for 24 possibly. You know what, that might be a bit too squishy. Let's go for 32 for sticking with that 8 pixel grid. And we're gonna do the same thing here. 19. Of course, if I set up my guides and my grids correctly, it would be much easier, but I was lazy. All right, can I create a component for a transform element box that rotates around X or Y on hover? The rotation will change. So Hala, if you're asking about 3D transforms, unfortunately not. 3D transforms do not work inside of components, and they may not ever. It was a very large engineering challenge, and I don't believe they were able to pull it off. But yeah, 3D transforms only works on the component level, like the parent level, but not inside the component, unfortunately. All right. So that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll just drag this down a little bit so it's a little bit smoother. Perfect. All right. So now, of course, if we did set up this other interaction, we can create a different view that you can toggle. Actually, you know what? Let's try that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to ungroup all of these groups. It's going to be a little bit of a mess. But the reason I'm doing that is so that we can create this interaction that's going to animate between these 2 artboards. So I'm going to duplicate this over to the right. So I just selected the artboard, Command and Control D, and this might be, what is this? So this is obviously a gallery view. It's not really a list view because maybe it is, I don't know. Top to bottom. Maybe if anyone knows the exact terminology for the view where photos go just like top to bottom on one per line, let me know. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start rearranging some of these photos. So we're going to just drag this outwards like this. Drag it down, and we're going to keep an eye on the height. So this is about 225, right? Actually, you know what? To make this a little bit easier, I'm going to move these out just so I have some room. Move this on in. We're going to keep that same 3 pixel spacing. Again, 3 pixels, not the greatest, but that is okay. Where was this cat? Okay, this cat was right here. That's perfect. 225. Is XD work for 3D assets? No. So you can use 3D transforms in Adobe XD, but you can't import actual 3D objects. That would probably just bog down Adobe XD like crazy. For that, you would probably use either Dimension or the newer one, Adobe Stager. And there's a few more that can definitely help. And then, of course, you can probably export images and bring those into XD if you so choose. Oops, that one should be here. I'm probably not going to go through and do all of these, but I will do a few of them. Because this will definitely take a while. And of course, one thing you can also do is you can select all these images, and then inside of the Properties Inspector, 225. You can just make sure that the height is 225 and also the width is 428. That way it's going to make it a little bit easier to just grab these images and pop them in here. And then we have the ice cream. That one. That one. Actually, what you can also do is pop this into a stack and it'll rearrange itself for you. So there's lots of different ways you can go about this. And this is a little bit ridiculous, but hopefully you get the idea. All right, so now the point of this is we wanted to create an interaction before the, from the gallery screen to the top to bottom screen. I think the landscape pick before the cat pick. Let's see, where's the cat pick? This one here, so the cat, oh, you're right, that one, okay. So actually what we can do now is we have all the photos here, we're gonna turn a stack on, it's gonna define it as vertical, and then, view, there we go. It's that simple, I just move it around. All right, so cat, that one, that one, that one, okay, so looks pretty good. So what we can do now is we can now hop into prototype mode right here at the top, and we can grab this new created icon that we created just a few moments ago. We can drag this over to this artboard. Now, what I will note is this icon here, same thing with the arrow, it can be sometimes a little bit difficult to select because they're fairly small icons, right? Especially this arrow, which is completely border-based. So what you should do in design mode is create a hotspot, like a square, that's somewhere in the 40 pixel range. It may seem very large, but if you look at the guidelines from Apple and Google and these various other mobile OS platforms, they usually recommend 40 to 45 for things like buttons. So what you can do is just move it behind the arrow and then just drop the opacity to 0. I'm going to group it. Oops. Group these two elements, arrow. So now it's a lot easier to select, right? You can basically click anywhere around this arrow on this rectangle and you will be able to select it. Especially if you're previewing this on an actual mobile device, it'll just make selecting these things and tapping on them much easier. This will be called filter, and I'm going to paste the hotspot in there, make sure it's centered at the back. Perfect. Now I did make a bunch of changes to this section at the top, and I did not use a component for this, so I'm just going to delete and replace. Use components, kids. All right. So back in prototype mode, same thing. We're going to grab this entire group. The wire is dragged over, and someone is asking if I want to remove a prototype wire. How can I do it? Masonry view. Yes, it could be a masonry view as well. So if you want to delete, all you have to do is select the element that has the interaction and press delete. That's all. And if you want to delete all your prototype wires, let's say you have one going from here to here, and maybe an image going from here to a different artboard, right? All you do is Command and Control A to select all, and then delete. It'll delete all the prototype wires that you had selected. That one didn't delete, I don't know why, but there we go. All right, so we have this prototype wire going from this element to this artboard, and now inside of the Properties Inspector, we can switch the type to Auto-Animate. And if you're just looking to transition between two artboards, you can certainly keep it at transition and then experiment with different animations or dissolves or just a cut. But we do want to see that animation take place. So we're gonna go with Auto-Animate. Tap is great. And we're gonna go for something fairly simple, ease in and out, and maybe a duration of around, let's try 0.4. It might be a little bit too slow, but we'll check it out. We don't want to go too long, because then user can be waiting around forever. What is happening? There we go. Press the wrong button. All right. So if we go ahead and launch the preview by clicking on the first artboard and playing, we can now click on this. Let me move this out of the way. Click on the filter icon at the top. Look at that. And of course, if we did have this, you know what we can do actually? We can use these exact same shapes. Well, I only have 3 of them. I want 4. So let's go back here for a second. I'm actually going to create an additional shape here. I'm just going to duplicate this. Rectangle 6, great. We're just going to keep it right there. Whoop, what is happening? There we go. My mouse is spazzing. and duplicate. I'm going to make sure that this is named exactly the same. The thing with Auto-Animate, if you have not used XD before or haven't explored prototyping with Auto-Animate, is that the layer names need to be the same across both artboards. So if I kept this one as rectangle 6 and the other one as rectangle 7, that element will simply fade in instead of animating. Of course, rectangle 6 and rectangle 7, not the greatest names, but that's okay. Robin saying, I've not watched an XD Masterclass live before. Welcome, Robin. And anyone in the chat? Give a little clapping emoji for Robin. Great to see you. All right, so we're on the second artboard, and we may want a little bit of an animation. So we're gonna make sure that these are square. All right, like this, and this one as well. Now those are a little bit too small, so we're gonna bump these up a touch. Let's go for 5 and 5. That looks a bit better. And now, again, from prototype mode, we can wire this same element back to the first artboard. All the properties inside of the properties inspector are going to remain the same, which is great. But what you're going to notice now is when I launch this preview one more time, keep an eye on this right here. Watch what happens. Oh, look at that. Whoop. Woo. It's the most subtle thing in the world. Let me unzoom out. But it's just so satisfying, right? And of course, all the photos below rearrange beautifully. I can just watch this all day. Look at that. Haha, fancy. And if you want to get really fancy, you can actually grab these elements here, these rectangles. Maybe I'll rotate them just a little bit. Why? I don't know, but we're gonna do it. Oh. Right? I wish the zoom was a little bit crisper, but look at that. Fancy. It's always in the details. I agree, Aubrey. All right, so we have this looking pretty good. And how much time do we have left? We have about 25 minutes, something like that, 20 minutes. Do we want to go for let's skip the navigation bar for now, because I do want to get to a different screen where we can actually look at the photo taking experience. So I'm going to create one more artboard. I'm going to press the A key to go to the artboard tool. I'm going to select the same preset, the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Boop. And for this one, this is going to be, you know, when you've got your phone, right, and you're pointing at somebody, you're seeing something in the viewfinder, there might be a button at the bottom to take the picture. That's the screen we're going to create. So this will be called Photo Taking Experience. It's probably not the best name for that artboard, but we're going to run with it. Now, of course, because we're going to be looking through this viewfinder, we need some sort of image in the background. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, draw out an image across the entire artboard, and then back over in Finder, I'm going to grab this image here. It's a great looking image, drag it directly in, and that's going to be essentially what the viewer or the user is seeing through that digital viewfinder. All right. Checking for questions. User's avatar, Shally, Howell Mountain. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, if anyone has questions, definitely throw them in the chat. All right, so we have the essentially viewfinder here, and we're also going to, you know, grab some of these elements at the top. Let's actually grab this overlay. Do we want all of these? Probably not. So I'm going to just grab the overlay, paste it over here. Again, you have to keep in mind that there is that notch at the top. It's about 45 pixels, somewhere in that area there. Benjamin saying he's really late. A little bit, but you can always watch this later. You can actually rewind this if you want and watch it from the beginning, or wait till this is over and then rewatch it immediately after. Now for here, we may want a few different elements. So I'm gonna actually hop over to Nucleo. And let's check out Font Awesome. We'll go for, let's say, a gear icon. Copy that, paste it into place. And these are all vectors, so I can just grab the fill, change it to white. And just like with the other icons on the previous artboards, what we'll want to do is add that hotspot behind it, considering this will be a fairly small icon. So definitely keep that in mind and follow those best practices as you can. Any hope of having the option to automatically dim the background when you're using overlay? Probably not anytime soon, but I would definitely like that. I think at some point they do want to revisit overlays and things like that, but for the most part, I have replaced overlays with components, and that gives you the option, well, not automatically, but you can definitely add overlays back there and things like that. All right, and then in the middle, there might be, an icon to bring down more information. iPhone has something like this. So I'm going to change this color to black. I might want to decrease the opacity a little bit so we can see more of that subject in the background. Then I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to grab this arrow, paste it, and then rotate it around. I'm holding down Shift to constrain it to 15-degree increments. That could work. It's not perfect, but it could work. And then possibly over to the left, we might want a way to go back, right? So maybe we can just grab this icon here. I don't know if this would make sense. It probably doesn't. But this might be a way to go back. This is why user experience is so important. Got to think these things through. Oh no, it looks like there's a, yeah, I suppose. All right, Nucleo is like a Pokeball, but for icons. Got to catch them all. I like that. All right, so we have that area at the top. I am noticing this icon here is just way too small. So what I would probably do is just increase the size on both of these. But those are, finer details that you can easily make changes to a little bit later on. And of course, if you're using components, which you should be using, you can just update one of them and it's going to update all of them. All right. Now, down at the bottom of this artboard, what I want to do is have this section down here that contains maybe a link to your gallery, photo gallery. In that case, this probably wouldn't make sense. User experience, think things through. A photo button to actually take the photo, and maybe a button to switch from the front camera to the back camera, for example, right? Looks like the Windows logo. It does, doesn't it? Shally's asking, can we import video? We cannot, unfortunately, but maybe in the future. All right, so we have down here, we have this area, and I'm gonna drag out a rectangle. And very similar to the top on an iPhone, where we have that notch. At the bottom, you also have that home indicator. Now, thankfully, it's not as intrusive as the notch at the top. So it's, somewhere around here, maybe about 4 pixels thick. It's something like this, and it's fairly close to the bottom. So it's right around here. This is another area you don't want to include any elements you're going to interact with down there. So just keep that in mind, right? And of course, that would go across something like that. Now, this section here, there's a few directions we can take this. We can keep it super simple, or we can get a bit fancy with it. We have about 10 minutes. Let's see if we can get fancy with it. So for this one, I am going to set the color of this container to black. Now we're not going to keep it like that. We're going to make a few changes, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to round out the corners. So maybe, something like 32. That might be a bit too much, actually. That's probably too much. Let's try 24. Now we want the top corners, top left, top right, but we don't want the bottom corners to be rounded. So you can either hop into your properties inspector and click this and make some changes, or you can hold down your Alt or Option key and drag that back and drag that back. All right, perfect. So that looks okay, but of course we want a few additional changes. We want to maybe be able to see some of the subject in the background. So we can enable a background blur. And if you have watched masterclasses before, or even some of my tutorials on YouTube, I love background blurs, but very subtly. If we turn this on, no. It's just way too much, right? So I'm gonna crank the blur all the way to 50, right? If we take it all the way down, it could be very distracting, especially if you have elements on top of this. But if I crank it all the way up, right? Shally's saying if we import 20 JPEG images in 20 artboards and you can make a video. I suppose you could. If you want to do that, knock yourself out. I don't have patience for that, but yeah, it works, I suppose. Can we get a 2-hour special episode in the future? That could be interesting. I can certainly do this for 8 hours a day if I didn't have... oh, you know what? Speaking of Adobe Max, I was about to talk about Max. Max.adobe.com. Registration is now available. It's coming up in less than 3 months. It's in October. I will be running the What's New in Adobe XD session. And we have new stuff, which I know about. Can't tell you just yet, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be really exciting. So definitely go to max.adobe.com, register for sessions, register for my session. It's going to be a good time. All right, so back to this. Probably don't want this, right? So I'm going to drop the brightness to about -20, somewhere right there. It's getting there. But again, we want it nice and subtle. We don't want to go too crazy with this background because we do want to put some elements on top of it. When is Adobe Max exactly? I believe it's October 26th to the 28th, something like that. It's on here somewhere. October 26th to the 28th. And it's free, it's virtual, it's gonna be a lot of fun. And Drew, I will not sneak anything. Not yet. I don't know if we're gonna be sneaking things before Max, but we'll see. But that's certainly not in my ballpark. All right, so we have this, and now what we wanna do is we wanna bring back some of the color from the original shape. You know, we have this black fill. So I'm gonna just bump up the effect opacity. Let's go for around 80%, right? It may not look like much right now, but if I move this around, you're seeing that there's a little bit of a background blur there. Now, of course, I can bump this down a touch so it's a little bit more apparent, 70%, right? So it's there, but it's also very subtle and it's also not there. And that's kind of what we're going for in this case. There might be cases where you might want a much stronger background blur, but in this case, I want to keep it nice and simple. All right, now again, over to the left, we might want a link to the gallery. We'll get to that. Over to the right, we might want a button to switch cameras, front and back. But I do want to get to the big button in the middle to actually take a picture. And this is going to be made up of a few elements. The first element in the background, if we're getting fancy with it, again, right? We're getting fancy with it. So we might want a bit of a dial. So I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, shortcut key E, that's the one. Robin says, registered for Max, registered and ready for Max. I can't wait. I really can't wait. You know, every year I say that. I can't wait to reveal some of the features that the team has been working on. Some good stuff. At least I think so. All right, so what we want to do is, you know, create that dial that kind of goes around. And we want it to be, you know, kind of have some ridges around the edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the border on. And just so we can see it, I'm going to change the color to red. I'm going to make the border thicker. Now, right now, the border is going on the inside, but we might want the border to go on the outside. So I'm going to switch over to this icon here, which will go on the outside. We can also do the center, but we're going to stick with the outside. And to help us with our little ridges, what we can do is we can change the dashes and the gaps. So I'm going to increase the dash. The gaps isn't too bad, but I can turn this on, right? And I can just experiment with this. Maybe increase the gap. Something like this. I don't know, somewhere in that area there. Maybe bump it up or down a little bit more. And there's a few different ways to get, you know, elements around this. But it obviously doesn't really look like anything right now. So what we want to do is we actually want to outline this stroke. And there's a few ways we can, you know, experiment with the ways this looks and so on and so forth. If I had more time, I would definitely perfect this a little bit more. But what I want to do is with this shape selected is under the object menu, we're going to go down to path and then outline stroke, or command or control, alter option, and then O, right? And that's going to separate those two elements. So we have our fill and we have our outline stroke. And now what we can do is we can kind of tweak this a little bit and then combine these into a single shape, right? So now we have this dial that kind of goes around. It almost looks like a dial on top of your DSLR camera or, you know, various other things that have dials. I don't know what else has dials, but many things have dials, right? And now once we have that, we can really start adding some textures and having a little bit of fun with this, right? So the first thing we might want is color. So what we're going to do is we're going to add maybe a radial gradient. just like this. And maybe we'll do, in the middle, we'll do a little bit of a lighter color. Maybe on the edges, we'll do a little bit darker. Make this a little bit larger, and then move this up a touch. So that way at the bottom, there's a little, looks like pie. Oh, now I'm hungry. I'm gonna get some pie after this. So it kind of looks like it has a bit of shading down here at the bottom, right? And we'll get to some other effects like inner shadows in just a moment. But now that we have the base color, what we can start doing is start adding maybe some textures. So I'm gonna duplicate this shape, Command and Control D. And over in my libraries, I actually have a textures library with a bunch of different textures. And one of them, or a few of them actually, where are they? I have a leather texture. Boop, just like that. Now, when I did that, it just looks like I just popped a texture on that shape, right? You can't really see that element in the background that we created just a few moments ago. So in that case, what we want to do is really start experimenting with some of the blend modes. So maybe overlay, not bad. Soft light is probably a little bit less crazy. And then you can always go back to the shape in the background and just make a few tweaks so it's not as dark like that, right? And then maybe we can also add a bit of an inner shadow at the top. And instead of an inner shadow, it might actually be a highlight. So something like this, maybe I'll bump down the blur to about 1, bump this, whoops, bump this down a touch, right? So we have a nice, almost like a softer edge back there. Maybe we'll add a bit of a drop shadow, very subtle, right? Something like that. Still a little bit difficult to see around here, so we can start experimenting with things like borders. Now we probably don't want to add a border there, right? We actually want to probably add it on the, whoa. Combined shapes are interesting, right? Are the textures on Adobe stock? Yes. So all of these textures I did license from Adobe stock, and they also have free textures as well. So if you go to stock.adobe.com/free, I believe, there's a ton of textures you can use completely for free, or you can also use a plugin like stock image, for example, and look up something like leather. And there it goes, and you can just pop some leather textures in. If you want the full image, you can license it directly from this particular plugin. Again, it's called stock image, or you can just, I believe, apply a sample as well. Time triggers only work between artboards. Yes, at the moment, again, like I mentioned earlier, one of the product managers did confirm that time triggers is actively in the works, but it's a very large project, so it'll be ready when it's ready, and I have 3 minutes left, oh boy. Okay, so we have that, and we may want maybe a ring on the inside. I'm gonna zip through this, basically using the exact same techniques that we used before, right? Now for this ring, we want it to be a little bit shiny, so we might want to do something like an angular gradient. And to keep with this, leathery gold feeling, we can, do something similar. So we'll do maybe a color like this. We'll apply the same color on that side. We'll make it a little bit lighter here, a little bit darker. And whenever you're using angular gradients and you're trying to make it look a bit shiny, it's usually a good idea to kind of alternate. Light, dark, and especially if you're using textures behind it, it'll eventually give you a really nice feeling. Something like that. It's not the greatest gradient in the world, but it might do for now. And then on top of this, if I duplicate this Command and Control D, back in my textures, let's see, I can grab this texture, pop that in there. Oops. There we go. And we might want to do something like multiply, for example. Interesting, not great, but interesting. And then maybe drop the opacity a touch, maybe to 70%. And then on top of this, we might want to add a bit of a rust texture. Maybe you've been using this dial a lot. So again, duplicating this, I can drag out another texture. And then this one, maybe we'll switch this over to something like overlay, right? And it's starting to get there. And very similar to that dial in the background, we can add a drop shadow just to pull it up from the leather in the background. We can add a bit of an inner shadow. Again, this is going to act as a highlight rather than an actual shadow. Drop this. Maybe we'll drop it a little bit more. Drop this. right? There we go. How can I get in touch? Let me know. Shally, if you have more questions, definitely tweet, or you can go to, like Drew said, you can go to Discord, or you can tweet at Adobe XD. You can also include me if you want as well. And then finally, on top of this, very quickly, we might want the actual button. Now this one, we're not gonna go anything crazy. Linear gradient, something like this, right? Maybe I'll add a little bit of color up here. And then there's a lot you can do. Again, you can add a little bit of a shadow. 1, 0. Just bring this down a touch. And then essentially, if I just cheat a little bit, if I'm gonna grab this from another document, hold on, where is it? Bam, right? You get something like this. If you really spend a little bit more time to perfect this, but using the same techniques, textures, inner shadows, that sort of thing, right? It's a basic version of it. So definitely spend more time. It's hard to crank this out in like 5 minutes, right? All right, that is going to do it for today. Samuel, Umacorn, Megan, Masayu, Cornell, Gal, Ankita, Shally, great to see all of you. Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few minutes. I will be back next week, not just with my masterclass, but also I'm gonna be running the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Crazy, right? Stay tuned for that, and I'll see you all very soon.